Before dawn, the river lay silent beneath a shroud of mist. The current moved like breath beneath the fog, hiding what it carried. From far off came the faint rhythm of oars, steady, patient, unbroken. Along the banks, the people of the city waited in uneasy silence, their breath turning to clouds. Somewhere a bell stirred, then stopped. The Seine, once a lifeline of trade and faith, now became the road that would deliver their trial. From the heart of the mist, dark shapes began to take form. First one, then many, their long hulls gliding in silence as if carved from the fog itself. The river carried them gently, but their oars struck the water with purpose, each pull a heartbeat of iron resolve. Shields lined their sides like the scales of a serpent catching the first light of dawn. The bells of Paris fell silent. Every watcher on the wall knew then. The river no longer belonged to them. It had chosen its conquerors. Behind the stone walls of Paris, the city held its breath. Soldiers lined the ramparts, their armor dull in the gray light of morning. In courtyards and chapels, prayers mingled with the clang of iron, and smoke from 100 torches curled into the dawn. Children were carried below into cellars where the sound of the river was faint. On the highest tower, the Count of the city watched the fog drift and vanish, revealing the dark sails upon the water. He did not speak. The bells began to toll. Not for worship, but for war. When the sun broke through the mist, the river was already aflame. Arrows whistled over the walls and vanished into smoke. The first of the ships rammed against the bridge, splintering wood and bone alike. From the towers, defenders answered with fire of their own. Stones, tar, and boiling oil crashing down into the fog. The sound was not of battle, but of thunder made by men. Through the chaos, the banners of the north pressed forward, unyielding, unafraid. And still the bells rang, calling every heart within the city to hold fast, and every heart beyond the walls to tremble. Thunder ceased, only smoke remained. The river no longer glittered. It boiled beneath a sky the color of ash. Charred hulls drifted together like fallen leaves. Along the banks, the wounded called for names that would never answer. Within the walls, no voices rose. Only the crackle of broken timber and the rustle of prayer. Victory and ruin had arrived in the same breath. And through that breath, Paris endured. But the river would not rest. From the haze came new sails, dark against the pale smoke. They moved like blades through the current, quiet, certain, relentless. Fire met fire, tar pots burst, arrows burned. The wind carried sparks across the water. On the walls, men fought for moments rather than miles, for the heartbeat between one bell and the next. Shields buckled, stones fell. The river roared like a living thing, and still the ships pressed on. No trumpet promised victory, only the will to endure. For as long as the towers stood, the city stood with them, and for that breath of time, Paris still lived. Night fell with the storm. Rain turned the ashes to mud, and lightning revealed every wound upon the walls. Yet torches still burned, where men refused to fall. The air was thick with smoke and rain and iron. For every gate that broke, another door was barred. The streets ran with water and blood alike, but the defenders stood shoulder to shoulder, their voices drowned by thunder. On the ramparts, shields flashed white in the lightning, and somewhere below, a single bell still rang. The dead lined the stones beside the living, silent companions in defiance. In the heart of the storm, the city endured, and through the rain's roar, Paris still lived. Inside the walls, time slowed. Smoke hung in every hall, torches burned low. The wounded lay shoulder to shoulder, whispering names and prayers. Chapels became refuge, courtyards, infirmaries. Children slept beside broken shields, while rain found the cracks above. Monks moved through the corridors with small relics that caught the light like embers, their soft chant rising and falling, the heartbeat of a city still alive. In the passages, footsteps echoed softly. Outside, the thunder drifted away. No one spoke of victory, only of mourning. And when the bells stirred again, they sounded less like warning and more like hope. On the walls, the few who still stood braced like stone. Shields were split, helms were dented, but no one stepped back. Orders cut through wind and smoke, hands moved by memory more than strength. Along the rampart, a rider passed with a word for every post, and beside him, a bishop raised the cross against the dark, bright as any torch. Arrows hissed and vanished into rain. Stones fell, fire pots burst. The river roared below. Each man knew the price of these stones. They would not yield it cheaply. And as the bell struck once, clear above the storm, the line held. Beyond the hills, a horn cut through the rain. Riders gathered on the ridge, banners snapping in the wind. Mail and leather steamed in the cold, and hooves tore the mud to ribbons. A young commander raised his hand, and the line began to move. Not in triumph, but in duty. They saw the smoke over the river and pressed harder, each mile paid for by someone within those walls. No one promised victory, only arrival and the strength to stand beside a city still fighting. Through wind and rain, the column rolled on, and with every hoofbeat, hope returned. At last, the riders saw the walls. Smoke drifted like ghosts above the towers, and the river glowed red beneath the dawn. No trumpet called, only the sound of hooves on soaked earth, slowing to a halt. They had come too late for glory, but not for salvation. The gates opened on a whisper. Inside, the defenders stood among ruins, faces blackened, eyes bright with disbelief. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then a single bell rang, not for warning, but for welcome. And as the sun climbed through the mist, Paris breathed again. When the sun rose higher, the river ran silent again. The ships drifted downstream, sails torn, shields blackened by soot. Oars moved without rhythm. The warriors no longer sang. On the banks, smoke curled from broken towers. The walls still stood, scarred, but standing. No cheers followed their retreat, only the creak of timber and the hiss of water against flame. Paris watched in silence, too weary for triumph. The tide carried the invaders away, and the river that brought them now became their road home. In the calm that followed, the city listened and heard only the wind. Days passed, and the smoke thinned. The river ran clear again, carrying the ashes of battle out to sea. Within the walls, the people rose with the sun. Hands that had fought now built, stone by stone, beam by beam. The sound of hammers replaced the bells of alarm. Children played where soldiers once stood guard. The wounds of the city remained, but they no longer bled. Paris did not fall. It remembered and endured. And as evening settled over the river, the torches on the walls burned not for war, but for light. The river remembers. Long after the swords have rusted, its waters still carry the echo of that day. The towers have changed, the streets have grown, but beneath the stone, the heartbeat of the old city endures. They called it victory. They called it salvation. But for those who stood upon these walls, it was simply survival, paid in silence. Tonight, the bells ring softly, not for war, but for remembrance. Their sound drifts across the same river, over the same wind, and in that sound lives the truth of every siege. Cities endure because hearts endure.